And it's McNamara keeping it and diving for the end zone. He scores.
Penix underneath, and this time he gets David Ellis. Touchdown, Indiana.
Ritter wide open, tight end, Taylor, touchdown.
You are listening to The Review on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Review. It's the Online Sports Guys College Football Weekly Wrap-Up podcast where we talk about all the action, reaction, and interesting news and notes that came out over the course of this college football week. And guys, one thing for sure, we have not lacked for drama. No. As always, OSG Nelson, Jay Wilkerson 16, three of the many online sports guys. You can find our content on the web at theonlinesportsguys.com, along with our social media pages at OSG Sports on both Facebook and Twitter. And of course, if you're watching this at home, that means you probably found our YouTube page, which is, guess again, at OSG Sports.
Shocker.
Guys, we might as well start out with some of the bigger games of the week because it's a rare week when we actually had Big Ten games that were kind of the headliners. I would say the biggest of the two, it depends on, I guess, who
I was going to say, where are you going with this, with defining your terms here, bud?
Yeah, it depends a little on your allegiance. You could argue either the Ohio State win over Indiana to kind of jump out to a big lead in the Big Ten East, or Northwestern pulling a moderate but not totally a surprise upset over Wisconsin to take the undisputed lead in the Big Ten West.
Or Big Ten After Dark.
Yeah, Northwestern Wisconsin game, that was kind of an old-fashioned Big Ten slobber knocker kind of game. The Wildcats pull off a 17-7 win and really cut themselves in the driver's seat at this point. They're 5-0. Probably one of the quietest 5-0 teams that you'll find in all of college football, and they're just kind of doing what they need to do in order to get wins.
19, most of them short throws. This one's a long beautiful throw. And it's for RCB. It's a touchdown.
Well, they are the image of Pat Fitzgerald, and they uglied it up against Wisconsin, and Wisconsin was willing to get ugly as well, and it worked out really well for the Wildcats. And it did kind of set football back, I guess, in a way. These are the scores we're kind of used to. So to me, it's like, well, it was a normal football game, especially for SEC guys. But you know what kills me about Northwestern is they had about 239 yards passing total, and not a whole lot of rushing yards in this game. So
it's just enough to win.
Just enough to win. 24 yards rushing, which their defense played really well against Wisconsin. Wisconsin, they're kind of at a crossroads right now, trying to figure themselves out. I don't think COVID helped them as much. Get the 2 weeks off. Northwestern knows exactly who they are. They are tough grinders, fundamentally sound. They're bringing the sledgehammer and hitting you in the mouth. And it's quite refreshing to watch a team like Northwestern have the kind of success they are with that style of play.
And yeah, I mean, it is kind of the Northwestern Mutual version of college football. It is a very quiet 5-0, but yeah, I mean, Wilkie's got it pretty much pegged that they are the personification of their coach, and they're going to sit there and they're going to put up a stone wall on defense. They're going to dare you to do things. They're very, very sound on both sides of the ball, and so by the end of the day, you end up and you turn around and Northwestern ends up getting the Duke, and they're just kind of quietly going about their business. Of course, now that we're talking about them, it's not going to be as quiet anymore. But it's, for me, I like to see teams like a Northwestern kind of work their way into the discussion where we're not talking about the same folks every single week, and we're not talking about the same situations, whether it's a blowout with those who are the top 4 or 5 in the country or something like that, or the teams that are that are always in the discussion because of name recognition and brand, and then they always want to stumble on their, with their shoelaces tied to one another in a moment when you think that they're going to make that next jump. But yeah, for me, Northwestern, you sit there and all of the offensive stats go Wisconsin's way. But last time I checked, you could get all the numbers in the world. You could get time of possession. You could get yards all you want. But last time I checked, if you ain't scoring, you ain't winning.
And Graham Mertz did throw 3 interceptions in the game, which helped. And I think a lot of it has to do with just how good and that defense of Northwestern is. So the turnover battle really played into Northwestern's advantage there. And they took advantage of that and won a grinder.
Now, the opposite of that would be the other big game in the Big Ten, Ohio State and Indiana, a game that Ohio State jumped out to a huge 28-7 lead at the half, only to have Indiana come roaring back, and the Buckeyes have to hold them off for a 42-35 win.
Mike Penix delivers. Oh, Brad Fogel caught it. Touchdown, Indiana.
This was a game where Michael Penix Jr. threw for 491 and 5 touchdowns for Indiana. Just by contrast, Justin Fields, the guy who's gotten all the hype, and a lot of people, including me last week, said probably should be the leader in the clubhouse for the Heisman Trophy. He had 3 picks and was only 18 for 30 in the game. Really, it was the Ohio State ground game that wore down Indiana. Master Teague the third, 26 carries, $169, and 2 touchdowns. Does this seal the Big Ten East for Ohio State?
For me, and this is going to sound really, really cheesy, but I had them sealing the East week 1 when they got back out on the field. I didn't see anybody knocking them off. I really didn't. And right now they're number 3 in the AP poll. The new AP, as we're talking, is out. And since we talked about Northwestern is now number 11 in the AP poll. But you look at Indiana, and my question to the floor was going to be, as we're talking about this game, so Ohio State was number 3 going in. Indiana was number 9 going in. For me, how far do you drop Indiana across the board, considering they performed well enough, they put enough doubt in folks' minds about Ohio State's focus over a full 60 minutes, and you come in and you only lose by 7? Guys, how far do you drop Indiana? And I'll tell you how far they did drop in the AP poll when we're finished with this question. Wilkie, how far would you drop them, if any?
I would, if I was going to drop them, it'd probably be a spot or 2, or maybe even stay put, simply because they kind of proved themselves at the Horseshoe.
Yeah.
They were hitting the mouth pretty hard in that first half. And they found that intestinal fortitude. Plus, when you have a great player, actually 2 great players, in Ty Freifogel and Michael Penix Jr., and they are locked in, and Sapatico out there on the field, that is enough for me to convince me that this is a pretty good football team. Getting 3 picks on Justin Fields bodes well for their defense. So I wouldn't drop them that much, if at all, maybe a couple of spots, because that Indiana team, look, I think either when you talked to Don Fisher or when I did, he kind of indicated this is a special young group of men. And again, that is a special team, and good. And you always look for that team that has all the good fortune going their way. And Indiana seems to be that team, even against Ohio State. Ohio State was just superiorly talented over Indiana from 1 to 22 with the starters. So I wouldn't drop them that much.
Phil, what do you think?
I'm thinking probably 12 to 14, somewhere in that ballpark.
Yeah.
That's, I think, a fair assessment for a loss. There's still time to make that ground up a little bit, but it's hard. For me, it's really hard to justify rankings on a lot of teams right now because it's been such an unpredictable season in terms of the outcomes and the way games are played.
And really, right now, the AP poll doesn't matter because the playoff poll comes out in a couple of days.
The end result, by the way, Indiana dropped behind Northwestern from 9 to 12. Northwestern at 11, Indiana at 12.
I could see that.
That's about right, and they can claw themselves out of that. But I mean, when you rush for -1 yards, that to me that's the difference of the game right there. They needed to establish a little bit of a run game. It's hard to do against that front seven Ohio State. They are they're good.
Yeah, they're okay. They have their moments, yes.
Yeah, they've had a few moments or two,
they're all right.
or three.
Yeah.
But now what's left for Ohio State? At Illinois and at Michigan State. That's 2 wins right there.
Yeah.
And then the game against Michigan in the horseshoe, which could be interesting.
Sorry, did I laugh out loud?
Yeah. Well, hey,
again, I don't discount rivalry games, so could be interesting.
Speaking of Michigan, a hell of a gutsy performance there as Cade McNamara comes off the bench and helps the Wolverines salvage what could have been a painful, crushing loss to Rutgers in a 2-overtime 48-42 win for the Wolverines.
Snap to McNamara, and leaping in is Hassan Haskins. Touchdown, Michigan.
Well, special teams also helped for Michigan because they ran back the second half kickoff back for a touchdown. And at that time, Michigan was kind of mentally fragile. They had scored, I believe, right toward the end of the second quarter, and it kind of got things going positively for Michigan. But you could sense they're a little mentally fragile going into the locker room. And when they got that, it was just that boost of confidence that Michigan wanted. And there's a lot going on right now about Jim Harbaugh and his job status. And my observation is this: those guys are still playing very hard for Jim Harbaugh. And for that reason, alone right now, I say they're not going to do anything with Jim Harbaugh this year. He'll be back in 2021. We mentioned that you get a COVID pass. Let's give him a COVID pass. But the guys are still playing hard for him. And a Michigan team that quit on their coach wouldn't have come back the way against a Rutgers team because they showed some pride out there. And let's face it, Rutgers isn't the gold standard in the Big Ten. Yes, and I got to give my hat off to Greg Schiano because he's really coached up that team, and they played really well against Michigan. I guess my assessment is, Michigan is probably middle of the road Big Ten right now, but playing very hard and just need a couple of breaks coming their way. Rutgers is on the upswing. The Greg Schiano hire is definitely a big hire, a great hire for Rutgers.
I mean, I give Rutgers a boatload of credit being down 8 late in the fourth quarter, and they have the drive that gets the touchdown with time running out. Noah Vedral had a great day, 29 of 43 for 381 and 3. They get the 2-point conversion to take it to overtime. And then, Wilkie, you mentioned special teams. Michigan misses a field goal in overtime, and Rutgers has the opportunity to win it in overtime, but they miss the field goal as well, which sends it to continued extra frames. But no, as part of the discussion that we've been having, I think that it is Sam Pittman and Greg Schiano that are in Coach of the Year discussions. You're seeing a vastly different Rutgers team right now, even if wins and losses don't really show it. Well,
there were a couple of sideline shots in that game with Schiano with the guys huddled around him. And he's doing to me, I mean, he's hands-on. He's there in the trenches with the guys, and I think the guys are responding to that. Not that the previous administration was hands-off, but he's a Jersey guy like the rest of those guys, and they can relate to him. And I think that is huge for that program. And I just think he's done wonders there. And then there's a few factions I'm sure are thinking, man, could he have done this with Tennessee if he stayed there? Yeah. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's already making the rounds down in SEC country. One other Big Ten game I want to mention really, really quick, guys, before we move on. Penn State drops to 0-5.
Did I laugh out loud? Sorry.
You did laugh out loud. They lost 41-21 to Iowa.
not only lost 41-21 to Iowa, but it was at Happy Valley.
In Happy Valley, yeah.
Which is probably not so happy these days.
Story.
Just an awful performance. 4 turnovers for Penn State. Otherwise, a fairly even game.
That's James
not
Franklin
really sure
calling,
what to
by
say
the way.
here. God, I hate that.
That's James Franklin calling, Phil. He's that mad at you.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Therefore, we won't spend too much more time on this.
I mean, but think about where Penn State is right now. 0-5 for the first time in program history. And you are saddled with a coach where I think the message is lost. And if I'm not mistaken, I think the James Franklin buyout is north of 38.
Yeah, it's up there.
I mean, that is Ferencian when it comes to a buyout number. I mean, I don't know. Were the same folks? I mean, was Bartha negotiating that one too when it came to that particular contract? I mean, that's just crazy. Oh God.
I think Franklin's another one of those who might get a COVID pass this year just because of A, the buyout, and B, because of his previous track record. But I don't think the leash is going to be too much longer than this season.
Well, Penn State is very dangerously close to becoming irrelevant, like Nebraska has become.
Like Florida State has become.
And I was going to say John's alma mater, but
hey, it's therefore I accept any
they're
and
not
all
that far removed from having
slings and arrows. We are 7 years irrelevant by the time another new coach comes in.
But Penn State's not that far removed from it. This is their first bad season that they've had.
No, but the trending and the it's very similar to what I've seen with Nebraska.
Nebraska's on a much worse scale there.
Well, the Nebraska scale is they can't get the guys out of South Central LA anymore, or guys out of New Jersey they used to get as skill players. They can still get the linemen in Nebraska and South Dakota, but they're just not getting the skill players they used to get from the inner cities. And Penn State, James Franklin pretty much changed the recruiting landscape for Penn State. And, he was going after guys that not the kind of guys that Paterno got or Bill O'Brien got. It was more of a national scope, but guys that could respond because he's not an X and O guy. James Franklin's not an X and O guy. He's a deal closer, and he's a guy that gets the guys pumped up. He's very similar in that way of Dabo Swinney, but Penn State is not the brand name they used to be.
No,
and that's really hurting the Nittany Lions.
Guys, they're coming off an 11-2 season and a Cotton Bowl win last year, so it's not that much of a downturn. Franklin's won 56 games there in 7 years.
Okay, so that's 8-4. I don't think that's acceptable. If you're
his first two seasons were 7-6, but then you got 11-3, 11-2, 9-4, 11-2, and 0-5.
I think that the message is lost. I think
I
that
do too.
I just think that. And short of and see, that's the thing. Yeah, I know that you give somebody like that a COVID pass, but I think that it's more a buyout pass, not wanting to pay 38 than it is a COVID pass, just because of what we're seeing.
I don't think one season blows somebody out at this level, unless you're in the SEC.
No, at a place like Penn State, where football is just as mad in Western Pennsylvania as it is in the South, and. There are going to be some swords coming out on James Franklin. Now, I don't think anything's going to happen after this year. I think that the buyout is too cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
But I think the message has been lost, and I just don't think that the fan base and even the donor group are as enamored with James Franklin right now. They're not seeing the result in the field.
They also lost their best running back at a potential first-round pick to a heart defect. They've had, I think, 3 potential first round draft picks who opted out for the season.
But if you're a CEO of a program, or if you're a CEO of any business, let's just put it this way: if you're the CEO of a business, then if you lose some of your best and brightest, whatever business you're in,
right,
you would like to think that you've hired folks that are a part of your phone list that everybody gets, that they've got on that push pin right next to their computer, where you can sit there and say, okay, who's going to take over for these folks who for some reason or another aren't with the firm right now. So I would think that if you're a CEO and you're a deal closer, you want that extra depth that's there. And for some reason, James Franklin didn't bring in those extra guys that would help shore up the processing department. If you lost one of your best processors, or if you lost one of your best negotiators, you would have liked to have thought that you'd have 5 or 6 good negotiators instead of that one star negotiator, and then trying to figure out who else you're going to need. Oh, crap, we've lost our lead negotiator. Who do we have? You'd like to think that you'd have trusted other individuals that are under your roof that would be a part of this.
Yeah, at Penn State in the past, they've been able to plug people in to those spots, and that's what that fan base expects. They expect, even though you've had guys that went off because of medical issues or decide to opt out, there should be somebody there to plug right in and at least get you some kind of production. And that's just not happening at Penn State. And I think a little of that has to do with the assistant coaches. I think those are the ones that are going to go before James Franklin goes.
No doubt. That's going to.
I think there's going to be a house cleaning of that staff.
Yeah.
And then that's when James Franklin will be on the hook if this repeats itself.
Yep. We'll have to agree to disagree here on the show, because I just don't see it. But anyway, we'll move on here to the SEC because we got some stuff to talk about there.
We can talk about Alabama and Kentucky, right?
Alabama and Kentucky was close for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, 7.
Enough that people were like, "Wait, Alabama's only up 7-3 in the first quarter." Well, yeah,
there wasn't for it.
Yeah, they did.
There wasn't much to worry about there. The final score ended up being 63-3. Devonta Smith, another huge game, breaking an SEC record for catches. Top flight, one of the best wide receivers, if not the best wide receiver in college football. Kentucky, a decent defensive team, but they had no chance in this game, did they?
They also had 10 guys absent that Coach Stoops is used to having in their lineup, but they didn't have a chance. Not having 10 starters or not having 10 other bodies that are there, some of them starters. I think that contributed to.
Yeah, I mean, what else can you really say about this game right now?
Bama won by 60. What else is on your mind?
Yeah, I mean they're the big dog. Until proven otherwise.
Yep.
Big win for the Florida Gators, 38-17 over Vanderbilt.
Vanderbilt.
Yeah, Kyle Trask having for him a slow day with only 3 touchdowns, but an easy win for the Gators. Interesting game for the Georgia Bulldogs as their new quarterback, the third quarterback to start a game for them this season, JT Daniels, comes in and has a huge game. 28 for 38, 401, and 4 touchdowns for a team that just absolutely was dying on offense. Painful death.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not so sure if they're not still dying, because I look at the rushing numbers and I watched a little of this game as well. The effort was just not there. And I understand JT Daniels has got some skill at quarterback, and maybe he should have been there at the top, but as for the rest, and even that defense, it's just beat up right now. The depth that we thought that Georgia had on defense just isn't there. And the effort just isn't there as well. And they went up against the Mississippi State offense. Let's just say the offense of Mississippi State was god awful. Forget about that LSU game. That was an anomaly.
Yeah.
But it was very hard for me to watch Georgia, because the effort just didn't seem to be there. There's just something that is really missing with that group right now, and I just can't put my finger on it.
No, it makes me wonder too, because I agree with you. They at times look like almost they're going through the motions, and they'll make a big play or somebody will make an individual effort, and all of a sudden it'll perk things up a little bit, but they'll go 15, 20 minutes of a game just kind of looking like they're just ready to kind of stick their nose in the ground and not do much of anything. And that's, if you're playing at that level of college football, you can't do that.
No.
Well, when you've got a special back in Zamir White and he only gets 11 carries and for 21 yards, you got to use him more. Yep. I mean, that is a special talent, and that's Georgia's bread and butter. Well, I understand you want to show off JT Daniels. He's the new shiny toy. And he put up some impressive numbers, but do you really need to put up those kind of impressive numbers to win at Georgia? I mean, you've got a stable of running backs that are as good as anybody.
Yeah, Kenny McIntosh, who's a freshman, could be starting for most of the teams in Division I right now.
I agree.
Let's see here. As we go back on the computer, which is running really slow today for some reason.
All right. So since we talked the SEC, let's talk Heisman guys real quick. Wilkie, where is Kyle Trask in your discussion? Is it still after what we saw from Justin Fields? Is Kyle Trask number 1 or number 2?
I'd put Trask at the top of the list. I mean, he's been pretty consistent with his play. I mean, Phil mentioned that was a little bit of a mediocre effort, I guess. But when 3 touchdown passes is a mediocre effort, that's kind of big. And Florida, Florida's the best team in the SEC East right now. They're going to be Alabama's opponent in the title game. So team-wise, they've done everything. So I think it's Trask. Fields is probably number 2, and I think that's really your 2 front runners right now.
Phil, you held up one index finger.
Yeah, I think it's Kyle Trask for the taking if he continues on the path that he's on. I'm kind of looking forward, I don't know about you guys, to seeing the SEC championship game if it's going to be Alabama versus Florida, because that has the potential to be a 70-60 game.
Take the over.
Well, Kyle Trask has 2 votes, Steve Spurrier and Danny Warfel.
Oh, very
so those
nice.
are guaranteed.
Very nice.
Yes. Where are we? I'm looking at the time here. We've got time to hit a little bit more.
All right.
So you're not discussing Arkansas and LSU?
Oh yeah, that's right. No, we got to talk. We got to find out about Arkansas and LSU because of the officials. Go.
Yeah,
I forgot about
Wilkie, I'll let you take this one. Describe the
level of agita.
Yeah, for lack of a better way to put it, describe the weirdness of watching that game and what happened in it.
Well, let's see. I thought the officials did a great job of handling adverse conditions of the rain and the wind and at Reynolds Razorback Stadium, and it was just a display of god awful officiating. And I made a comment to a buddy of mine back in Arkansas with basically saying that, the SEC office is going to have fun with this one. And a reply back that the response will be so lawyered up, nobody will be able to understand exactly what they're saying. But you had, again, a fumble scenario, I believe it was in the first half, second quarter, where the ball was clearly fumbled. And an Arkansas guy clearly recovered it, but they couldn't make a determination that it was recovered. So it was the play never happened. Very similar to what Auburn.
Not recovered.
Yeah, very similar to the Bo Nix situation in Auburn, where the recovery was not determined. So that kind of led off things. And then there were some holding calls that were made on LSU and on Arkansas that you're looking at like, well, where's the hold? I mean, the jersey wasn't grabbed, and when it was within the shoulders, which is allowable. But what took the cake was Jalen Catalon on a play up the middle. Catalon, I forget the LSU receiver, but he knew they were going to make contact, and he spun enough to where his shoulder hit the shoulder of the other LSU player, and he was called for targeting. And even when you watch the replay several times, it's shoulder on shoulder. And he spun. How do you target when you got your back turned to a to the defender? And yeah, he was helpless, but what do? I mean, you see that you spin and you just try to make it as much as least contact as you can. And they look at the replay and basically say it was targeting and Catalon was ejected, which I really think hurt Arkansas after that. And
you'd be targeting if you're ducking away from somebody and still end up making contact.
You spun. You actually spun, and your shoulder hits the other guy's shoulder. Yeah, his head snapped back, but you can make that determination when you look at the replay. That I don't expect that crew to be working very many games this year. But Hunter Yurachek, the Arkansas athletic director, a guy I really like a lot, got on Twitter and said, "I cannot change the outcome of any or the other missed calls, but I will work with the appropriate SEC officials to make sure that this targeting call does not cost Jalen Catalon our next game. My student athletes deserve better," unquote. So,
nice.
So I love it when an athletic director gets on his player's side. And Hunter Yurachek, I'm a Razorback. You all know that. And I'm very proud of him taking up for Jalen Catalon. It was a joke. It was a flat out joke.
Nice move by Yurachek having the athletes back. And that sends a nice message if you're trying to recruit too, that if you come here and play, we got you.
Exactly. But it was just a comedy of errors. And of course, Arkansas had a chance to win the game. Field goal was blocked toward the end. Good win for LSU. I mean, they get the boot for the 5th year in a row. Ed Orgeron is happy for a week, and we move on.
And Bo Pelini's safe for a week.
Guys, I think it's time we wrap up the first half of the show here. When we come back in the second half after the halftime break, we've got lots to talk about, including a couple of some big wins for some independent teams that are making a run at a pick six or potential college football playoff berth, some Pac-12 football action, couple of interesting games there too, and
stuff.
What's that?
And we got more stuff.
And we got stuff. So that all being said, I will toss it to break here. When we come back, that'll be what you hear us talk about. Stay tuned for more of the review. You are listening to the review on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network.
The OSG app is up and running on your Android or iPhone. Install the OSG app and listen to our podcast from college football, soccer, and lacrosse. What are you waiting for? Download the OSG app today.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency, or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Timeout! Okay, guys, Summers really had his bell rung and could have a concussion. I'm pulling him out for the game. Rodriguez, you're in for Summers.
Come on, Coach. It's just a ding. I'll shake it off.
Yeah, he's tough. Plus, we need to win this to make the playoffs.
Listen, we're a team and we need to look out for each other. Concussions are serious. No game is more important than your health.
Take concussions out of play. If you're a coach, know the warning signs and never let athletes return to play before a healthcare professional says it's okay. A message from CDC.
The Online Sports Guys would love to hear from you. Go to our Twitter page at OSG Sports for a comment, rant, or just whatever's on your mind about college football. Now, back to The Review with the Online Sports Guys.
We're going to play football. Yippee!
Thanks for sticking around, folks. You have made it to the second half of the review. It's the Online Sports Guys College Football Week wrap-up show where we talk about everything that happened in the past weekend in college football and things that happened over the course of the week as well. And guys, we talked about some of the big boys in college football in the first half. In the second half, I want to touch on two teams that we've discussed in the past and are still holding course as undefeateds. The first being Cincinnati, who not only got a win this week, they went down to the bounce house and beat UCF at their own game in a really good game, I might add, a game that I got to watch a little bit of.
Dokes takes the handoff, and no, he doesn't. Great prestidigitation and handiwork by Ritter.
I mean, 36-33, your final. Cincinnati stays at number 7 in the AP after the fact. And Cincinnati, you know, Wilkie, we talked about where Cincinnati's got to put up numbers, and they've got to put up large numbers. And the other team I know that's on Phil's mind, we'll talk about them in a sec, putting up those large numbers. But, of course, it's the quality of competition, too. Cincinnati needs wins like this to challenge themselves, to see where they are. And going down to UCF, who has that perpetual chip on their shoulder when it comes to being a national champion. Just look at the marquee. Just look at the marquee on the stadium press box. They'll tell you that they were a national champ. But Cincinnati, I think, needs wins like this to prove to themselves that they belong, especially going on the road and being in a tough place to play.
Wilkie, that was the Cincinnati defense held UCF to under 400 yards for the first time in over 2 years in a game.
Well, if you're going to, what we talked about Cincinnati, it's the schedule, and they really don't have a brand name in that schedule that everybody knows. Well, UCF is about the only one in the American that has kind of a national profile. And John, you did a good job describing why, because they felt like they were a national champion a few years ago, and they probably should have been able to play for one, because that was a special team. But to go into Orlando and win a grinding game like that and play UCF-style game shows how versatile Cincinnati is, and it's a big win on the road in a hostile environment, as hostile as you can get in the COVID restrictions. So yeah, even though they didn't put up the basketball number, they still got the win, and it still resonates with the committee. Where'd they move up in the AP poll, John?
They stayed.
Cincinnati.
They stayed
at 7.
So they stayed at 7.
Yep.
So okay. Now this becomes an issue for Cincinnati because, I mean, they're on the road the whole rest of the way. They're at Temple and they're at Tulsa. Tulsa's playing much better right now this year. So, but it's just not really resonating onto the national scene. You don't hear anything about Tulsa, and Temple has always been buried by. I mean, they're the lowest in low priorities in Philadelphia sports, so they're not going to get anything outside of Philly. So I don't see Cincinnati escaping that 7 hole unless teams above them begin to lose.
Yeah.
I think if they were going to make a move, it would be now with the UCF win. And yeah, they need a lot of help. And I think 7's about where they're going to stay.
The other team that we're talking about in the group of 5 undefeated category, BYU. Now, they did put up a big number, dropping a 66th spot on North Alabama. Zach Wilson didn't play that much, 10 for 16, 212, and 4 touchdowns. Kind of a cruise control game for the Cougars, but they keep on rolling.
Yeah, they do. And I guess it's the second teamers that got the big win for the Cougars. But see, the BYU is a little different scenario. John, did they stay the same?
They stayed the same.
Okay, so they stayed the same, which so really BYU, they got San Diego State coming up on December 12th. And I don't know if that's going to be enough to move the needle. San Diego State lost to Nevada yesterday. So they're kind of a middle of the pack Mountain West team. But what BYU has going for them is they're a brand name. They won a national title in '84. They have a national presence. They're just kind of a couple of rungs underneath Notre Dame in the independent status. So they've got some things going for them. Zach Wilson's a hell of a player. Some people in the nation know about him. But again, the body of work just doesn't really help this year BYU much, and I'm afraid they're going to stay where they are.
Yeah, they've had to patch together their schedule.
Yeah. So
yes, they have.
Yeah. Here's your points, just to give you an idea, Wilkie, and see if this influences your thought pattern here. Texas A&M at number 5 in the AP poll, 1,249 points. Florida at number 6 is 26 points behind. Cincinnati at number 7 is 48 points behind at 1,201. Then BYU's at 1,109. They're the only 8 teams that are in 4 digits when it comes to the point totals given by the voters. I know that BYU has a taller order considering they have to make up at bare minimum 92 points just to get to number 7. But in looking at 5, 6, and 7, A&M, Florida, and Cincinnati, you have 3 teams separated by 48 points in the voting numbers. Does that influence your thought pattern at all?
Not a whole lot, because again, Cincinnati. What's that?
They still need the help from somebody losing.
Right.
Exactly. And Cincinnati has played the brand name in the conference. UCF got a win, and it was an impressive win because they kind of played outside their norm, and it still didn't move the needle much for them. And when you've got Temple and Tulsa still left to play, I don't think, even if they put up 70 points in both games, I just don't think it's going to be enough to impress the voters, as with BYU. BYU has some advantages over Cincinnati, in my opinion, because of their tradition and the fact that they have a national championship already in Provo. But yeah, I just think they're not going to get the benefit of the doubt in that regard. So they need a lot of help if they're going to try to sneak in. A&M, I was trying to see who they had left. Florida, really, other than the fact they played Alabama in the title game, do you see any losses left on their schedule? So they're gonna need help, and you know, maybe it's unfair, but they've done all they can do. They just got to have help.
And they need Florida and Texas A&M and Clemson all to at least lose at least one more time, I think, before they even have a chance.
Okay, here's A&M's run in. It's LSU at home. They go to Auburn, then they go to Tennessee on December the 12th. That's the run in for A&M.
Yeah, the only one that scares me for A&M there is Auburn.
Yeah.
I don't know which Auburn team shows up, but they've got some talent there. I'm looking at what Florida has left, and they've got Kentucky at the Swamp. Then they go to Tennessee, and then they close with LSU at the Swamp. So I really don't see any losses there for Florida. They're going to take care of Kentucky. Tennessee's a mess. LSU,
borderline
mess. So it's really the Alabama game against Florida when they play for the SEC title that could move things to their advantage.
Yeah, and then you have that decision to make. Do you take a 2-loss SEC team and move them into that top 4 potentially, which opens up a whole other can of worms. Speaking of undefeated teams, I will move on here to the Pac-12, where the at least highest ranked of the Pac-12 teams, the Oregon Ducks, barely hold on to beat UCLA in the return of Chip Kelly to Oregon. Oregon 35, UCLA 38. Or I just said backwards, didn't I?
You did.
Oregon 38.
You were reading the box score. We know what you were doing. You were reading the box score as is. UCLA went to Autzen and lost by 3.
Phil's very sleep deprived.
Yes.
So,
I mean, it's, we've talked about it before, where this is SEC football West with what Mario Cristobal wants to do at Oregon. And, obviously when you have a game like this, where you're hanging on against a fairly certain inferior opponent, here's what gets me in this. So Oregon
and an opponent who turned the ball over 4 times.
Right. So, and this is part of the discussion that we're having here today. You have a team in Oregon and subsequently a team in Miami as well, who move up 2 spots apiece in the AP poll. You have Oregon going from 11 to 9, You have Miami going from 12 to 10, and I know we'll gloss through the ACC here in just a second. But for Oregon to have a less than inspiring win from the eye test, and you still go up 2 spots in the AP top 25, where we have the issues where we're talking about Cincinnati and BYU and some of the other Go Fives that we'll talk about in just a sec.
Well, I mean, UCLA came in here kind of wounded without Dorian Thompson playing quarterback, Dorian Thompson Robinson.
Right.
And Chase Griffin, I thought, did a good job in a very hostile place, although not as hostile when you have nobody there, but it's still Autzen Stadium. Demetric Felton really kind of carried the load for UCLA in that game. I thought UCLA did a good job of playing Oregon-type football.
Yeah.
But, Oregon's got to figure some things out on offense. I think they've got things figured out on defense. But on offense, it's just, they're missing a lot of parts from last year's team. They haven't had a whole lot of time to fill in those gaps. But they're still the gold standard in the Pac-12 right now. And what you're seeing with that vote totals, but the one with Miami kind of puzzles me. But look, they're Power 5 schools. They're on TV all the time.
Yeah. Brand recognition.
The brand recognition, exactly. And that's where I think BYU has a little bit of an advantage. But it's just not happening. I think the poll, the people are voting in the poll. And what I'm going to be interested to see is where Miami and Oregon are in the college football playoff poll. In fact, I'm interested to see where anybody is in that poll, because
outside of maybe Alabama.
Exactly, because I get the feeling that this AP poll is kind of going to be almost the equivalent of what the political polls were like before the election.
Yeah.
And to where they're not going to be anywhere near what the committee voters, they are part of what they use as far as who goes into the poll. But I'm just curious to see if there's some really wicked changes to that playoff poll, and whether Cincinnati or BYU or even Coastal Carolina is a lot higher than we expected or lower than we expected, and that Miami may be maybe a 6 or a 7, or Indiana, even though they lost to Ohio State, probably in the top 10. Who knows? I'm just saying this might be kind of a splash of cold water to some people when they see the playoff poll come out.
Yeah, because it goes back to prove how difficult, or you could even argue, and I have argued, irrelevant preseason and early season polls are, because a lot of it is exactly what we were just talking about, brand recognition. The big name schools always get the benefit of the doubt in terms of who's in the top 10, and always will early on in the season, because not everybody gets to see them play.
And there are former coaches and administrators on that committee that are voting in that poll. And I think that's going to be a telltale sign. What do they think of Cincinnati? What do they think of BYU, Coastal, even Liberty? Where do those teams stack up with somebody who has been in the trenches before and can recognize a good football team?
Yeah. Speaking of weird things happening this year, the Clemson-Florida State game.
Yeah.
I want to get you guys' thoughts on this.
Yeah.
The game was scheduled to be a noon kickoff Eastern on ABC, and at 9 o'clock on Saturday, word comes out that the game was postponed, leaving pretty much everybody involved, both the teams, the fans, the people covering the game, and pretty much everybody on the ABC or ESPN network scrambling for cover.
Yeah.
That's a tough look.
Yeah, it is. And Dan Radakovich was one of the first people to come out through social media to talk about the decision after it happened. We're disappointed that we will not be able to play today's game against Florida State. Clemson has followed all the ACC's protocols in preparation for this game. We look forward to returning to action next week against Pitt for Senior Day and Military Appreciation Day. And that particular tweet from Radakovich once again showing support for his university through social media. We talked about that in the first block. 144 comments, 312 retweets, and 894 likes. And so not the kind of situation, Wilkie, that you want to have early on a Saturday morning if you're a Power 5 conference.
And look, Clemson was ready to play, and I know this all rides from a backup lineman that was tested positive and was kind of, I guess, already in Tallahassee when they got word. Florida State wanted to play. It sounds like it. This just sounds like this was a league matter, and they interpreted their protocol in such a way that they went ahead and made the call 3 hours before kickoff, and leaving a lot of people scrambling what to do now. Now Clemson goes back to Clemson from Tallahassee without playing a football game, and that was an expense. And Radakovich was quoted as saying that, yeah, we can probably play him again on December 12th, but somebody else is going to have to pay for it. And I totally get that. It's just
not as simple as just showing up at a stadium and playing. There's a lot of costs involved getting teams back and forth.
A lot of logistics and so forth. So I just think this was like a hasty decision that was made, and none of the parties were happy about it. And of course, first thing you thought of is John's alma mater trying to back out of a game. And look, we all know Florida State is not that, wouldn't do something like that. This was a league-wide thing, and it just doesn't make the league look good, and didn't help their TV partner at all.
No.
Yeah, it was one of 3 ACC games postponed this week. The other big one being the Miami Hurricanes we just talked about a couple minutes ago, having to postpone their game with Georgia Tech as well, yet still moving up in the rankings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Georgia Tech and Arizona State haven't played a game in, 3 weeks now?
Yeah.
Yes.
And of course, Virginia Tech and Pitt played, but there was a mask mandate order in Pennsylvania, and they were going to have to wear a mask in the game. And I think a day before the game was kicked off, or maybe less than 24 hours, they got a reprieve on that. So they didn't have to wear the mask, but it did create kind of a stir with both the Pitt and Virginia Tech players.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it turned out being like Codicil 3 or Section 3 gave athletic teams the bypass to do stuff like that, because that was also going to impact other sports that were going on in the state of Pennsylvania this weekend. So it was wild scenes with mask mandates out of the state of Pennsylvania for stuff like this.
Yeah, we're talking about 2 straight weeks now with 15 games postponed in each week. But I think we're at a point now where we've got teams there's some teams who have 8 or 9 games already in the books, and we got to try and push through the season at this point.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but the same time, college basketball starts on Tuesday.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen anything as far as concern
actually,
with college basketball.
They have. I just saw today that the University of Florida's canceled a trip to a bubble tournament and postponed their first handful of games. And I think there's at least a half dozen other teams that have as well. Yeah.
Well, I know the Big Ten is doing a big tip-off on Wednesday. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, even college hockey has been starting up. And
college football's at the point of no return.
I get that, but I just don't see the same, the same focus on the other sports as far as whether they're going to get it on, especially men's college basketball, which has a decent following. It's just not on the level of college football right now. So
right now, yeah,
not at this time of the year.
Yeah, I think that when you get to what we think of in our heads as the timetable for conference play to start, which is usually the bit after the CFP and the national championship and all that kind of stuff, then I think the focus ends up going to those other sports, because, I mean, obviously right now everybody's locked in on football season. I think that's where everybody's eyes are.
Yeah, I mean, it's college football will always be the elephant in the room as long as they're in the room. And basketball has some options in terms of being able to isolate for the tournaments, because this time of year, a lot of what they do is teams travel to different locations to play in tournaments. Whether that's safe or not, I guess is another topic for another show.
Yeah.
But it's already had some impact on them. And seeing 15 games a week, I'm curious to see how some of these games are going to get played on the back end of the schedule, because at this point, there's at least a handful of teams that could potentially have regular season games scheduled on days where they're going to be playing in their respective conference championships.
Right. Yeah. And I think we've seen that in a couple of the Power Fives where you're going to have that. But obviously those teams right now aren't in that conference championship picture. So it just ends up being a part of the buildup. And then it just ends up being a part of the buildup. And then you have to figure out from the conferences, okay, so what's the deal? And how is this going to plot itself through? But no, right now you're looking at some simultaneous play with conference championships.
The one thing that concerns me is, are there going to be any more opt-outs from players from teams that have no shot at all at a conference championship or a national championship or a coaching change?
Yes.
And I think the NCAA has opened the door for that to happen and still keep your eligibility for next year. And I think that's going to end up hurting more than helping if that comes to fruition, because now we're seeing already number issues with scholarship players, and you have to have it's not mandated, but you have to have so many scholarship players to field a competitive team. Are we going to start seeing in December, guys are like, this isn't worth it anymore, and opting out? Yeah, it's going to end up more cancellations, or they'll play the game and it'll be a basketball score on one end. I just don't like to see how it's going to end, and it's almost to the point where let's get to the championship games and just kind of let that tournament go from there.
Yeah, I'll give you the perfect example of what I've mentioned. The Georgia Tech Miami game that got postponed this weekend, it got rescheduled for the 19th.
Right.
So hypothetically, if Miami ends up winning their part of the their half of the ACC, they would play in the conference championship game, and the Georgia Tech game would go away completely.
Yep.
Right. And of course, there's no divisions this year in the ACC with Notre Dame in, but I would say the likelihood of that game being played, even if Miami doesn't make it into the title game, which I don't see them making it, is still unlikely, because what are you playing for?
Yeah.
So I would give it like maybe a 5% chance it's going to be played on December 19th.
Position.
Yeah, well, everybody makes a bowl.
You get a bowl, and you get a bowl.
Yep.
Penn State's 0-5 and could play in a bowl game.
Yep.
Yeah, Penn State, because of brand recognition, gets a bowl invitation.
Yeah.
This would be the year that would happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
How funny would that be? And if I was a team that didn't get a bowl bid and they did, I'd be pissed. But it could, on paper it could happen.
Yep.
That's what do you say we wrap things up here on the review? It's been a productive week. As always, lots to talk about. If you like what you're hearing here, get our phone app. It's free. You can download it from the Google Play Store and from the Apple Store. Just look up, like everywhere else, just look up at OSG Sports, and boom, there it is. Whoop, there it is. As John likes.
No. I don't like to say that. But here's the app for those watching on YouTube.
He just likes doing the Count Floyd effect with
Monster Chillard App Theater.
Wilkie, you got anything lined up this week for the X?
We will be discussing that later when we stop this broadcast, but
we'll be Xing this week.
There'll be some kind of Xing going on.
Hopefully some good guests, and if you don't know what we're talking about, tune in or download the app and you'll get a notification.
Download the app and you'll get a notification.
When our midweek show, the College Football X, appears with random guests and lots of interesting people talking about the upcoming week's games. Guys, it's been another fun week. God knows what's in store for us next week, but I guess we'll just kind of have to roll with it.
Yep.
So for Jay Wilkerson, 16, for OSG Nelson, I am OSG Phil. We are the Online Sports Guys. Thanks for tuning in. We will catch you all again next week. Have a good one, everybody. Thanks and goodbye.
Like the voice you're hearing on this podcast? It could be on your production too. Just go to goodpipesvo.com. That's goodpipesvo.com and reach out to Steve Henderson on the Contact Us page. Go to the website, click on the Contact Us page, and then see what Steve's Good Pipes can do for your upcoming project.